Hi there, you're listening to episode 96 of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. My name is Ian Willoughby. This time out we have not one but two guests, half-sisters Eva Paddock and Lady Milena Grenfell-Baines. Today these amazing ladies are aged 88 and 94, but back in the summer of 1939 they were just 3 and 9 when they were placed on kinder transport trains from Prague to London, and so survived the Holocaust. Indeed, Eva and Milena were among 669 mainly Jewish children famously saved from the Nazis by Nicholas Winton and several others on the very eve of the war. The sisters were in Prague on Friday for the Czech premiere of the Nicholas Winton biopic One Life, which climaxes with his 1988 appearance on Esther Ranson's TV show That's Life, the moment that allowed Milena, Eva and hundreds of other survivors to finally connect with the man who had saved their lives. I spoke to Eva Paddock and Lady Milena Grenfell-Baines just ahead of the premiere, addressing my first question to Eva for this episode of Prague Talk. Is it the case that you were on the very last kinder transport that got out of Prague? When was that?
That's correct. That was July 29th, 30th. And we were on that last train. And as people have heard, Nicky Winton had another train ready to go with over 200 children, which was loaded and ready to go September 1st. And that's when the war was declared and the children were not allowed to leave, and it's presumed that most of them lost their lives in various camps, yes.
And at that time you were 3 or something?
I was 3.5, and Milena and I were on that train and were taken in to the home of a wonderful, wonderful couple in Ashton-under-Lyne, people we came to know as Mummy and Daddy Ratcliffe, and we were very, very fortunate. We were much loved and very, very well looked after. In fact, later my mother escaped. My father had been able to get to England, but he was ill and wasn't able to look after us. My mother was able to leave in 1940 in a very convoluted way via Norway, and we were eventually reunited, and we were raised in Ashton-under-Lyne.
And Milena, do you know how your stepmother secured you girls the places on the train?
This has always been a mystery to us, because it was 40 years after we'd been in England when we finally discovered who actually organised those trains, the famous Esther Ranson story. And I'm going to backtrack a little bit. If it wasn't for Esther Ranson, there would be no Nicholas Winton. I mean, he's become a world-famous character, but it was thanks to her that really this happened. But to go back, it was a mystery how we got on that train. Our parents never spoke about it. We know that other children's parents or foster parents never talked about it. As I say, it was 40 years before we discovered it, and by which time some of the children, like us, grown up, had probably forgotten their past, didn't want to know about their past.
And Eva, have you ever thought about what was going through your mother's mind when she took you to the main train station in Prague and put you girls on the train?
A lot. Mainly from the adult perspective of looking at my children and grandchildren. And I did meet with my mother later in life and talked about this, and I asked her, and she said she felt she was dying.
Do you have any recollections of the train itself? You were 3.5, Milena, you were 9.
Absolutely not. My recollections and my memories are in my autograph book, which I have, and the label that I still have that we had around Onyx. And that's the only way I can recall what happened and what's written in the book. And I've discussed this actually with a psychiatrist, and he said it's quite normal to forget. I mean, at our age, it's 80 years ago when it all happened. And I honestly cannot remember physically being on that train.
I think in the lingo it's repressed memory, which of course everybody understands. My recollection is only that I was very seasick on the boat. I've mentioned this before, and somebody gave me bananas, and I always decided that was probably why I didn't like bananas for a long time, but I got over that.
I was seeing a photograph of her as arriving in Liverpool Street Station. I think Eva must have been in shock. The only thing I know is that she didn't really talk on on travel. And I'm pretty sure that she was, at 3, she was completely traumatized. Because being 9, and I was supposed to look after her, I can't remember taking her to the toilet. We were on the train. I can't remember her making her eat. The only memories we all had, which we all shared, was when we got to Holland and we were put on this big ship coming to England and given tea with milk. Nobody liked tea with milk, and given white sandwiches, and nobody liked white bread. And this is something that you can read in other people's memories. If they remember nothing else, they remember the food.
Cotton wool bread.
Yes. Yes.
As opposed to the good Czech bread that we all love.
Yeah.
Given that your dad was in the UK before you arrived, why did you stay with this British family, the Radcliffes?
Yeah. He had a chronic lung condition, and so he was in hospital when we arrived, was not allowed to. Eventually, he was able to come and live in digs near to where we were. And that's another interesting thing. We have no idea how people knew where we were and how they reconnected us, but he did come to live up north in Ashton, and we saw him, but he would not have been able to receive us from the train or anything like that. The Radcliffes had already volunteered to take these 2 refugees. In fact, they were going to take just one, and then they saw a picture of the 2 of us, and I was very cute. We'll leave the rest to the imagination. And they lived in a 2-up, 2-down, 72 Alexander Street, and they had a daughter, 16, who was, of course, then already working in the mill, it was a mill town. And in order to take the 2 of us, Mary went to live with Grandma down the street, and the Radcliffes took us in. And as I said to people, we had no sell-by date. I mean, they could have been stuck with us for forever, and we were able to maintain that relationship throughout their lives. I mean, my parents became very good friends of theirs, and we were just very, very fortunate.
It's really a beautiful story. What do you recall of the end of the war, when you would have been 15, I guess, and you were 9 or 10?
I'll go back a little bit, because during the war, first of all, I went to an English school for 2 years, and then the Czech government opened a special school for some of the Czech refugees. So I spent the last 3 years in the Czech school. And the end of the war was declared while we were at school. And most of those kids were thinking, oh, great, we'll go home. And I do have stories from them. Some of them were literally flown back and sitting on the floor in the planes, getting out in Prague, going to this famous theatre opposite Obecní dům, which was the clearing station, where all the notices were on the wall, people looking for people, and most of them found no one. I came back from school, where I had been sent to by my parents, Eva had been at home, and I honestly don't remember any special celebrations. Our parents decided to stay in England. Although the Czechs, Beneš came back and the country was still free, there was already a socialist feeling. And when the communists finally took over in 1948, this is why my parents decided to stay in England. Although it was strange, because I think my father had his way. He would have loved to have come back. But I think my stepmother, who was Latvian originally, had gone through the Russian Revolution. I think she basically said, no, we're going to stay in England.
My father's had already got a job with UNRWA, the United Nations Relief Organization, and realized that the country would become communist. And what he said was, I don't need to have to run twice. And so they stayed in England and got citizenship, and they thought Britain was just a wonderful country, which it was.
How did these experiences, and knowing that essentially you were extremely lucky to survive the Holocaust, how did those experiences shape your outlooks later in life, or did they?
Well, we lived in the north of England and probably away from much of the political activity that was going on perhaps around London and some of the other refugees. I had gone to school, came home, had to go to work, because at that time the only support was from the Czech government, and my father had got a job, and my mother, who was a doctor, had learnt enough English, was to work as a volunteer, and finally was admitted to work in hospital. But I became a children's nursery nurse. Because our parents never spoke about the past, we just got on with our lives. I worked in a day nurseries for 3 years, and then I decided to get a job as an au pair in France. Spent 2 years there, came back, met my future husband, got married, had children, and got on with our lives. And it really wasn't until the Esther Rantzen show that things changed for us.
I've been interested to learn who we, the escapees, the survivors, became. And most of us went into the helping professions in one way or another. And as Milena said, for the first, till I was I got married young and had family and so on. It was until middle and later life, and when we learned about Nikki, that I began to deal with the implications of that. I think it shaped what I wanted to do. So I was a typical 50s wife. The husband, went out to work. But I grew up literally, metaphorically, and eventually went into a career in education, and then became a therapist. And I think that my past experience gave me insights and the desire to work with people. Milena's done a huge amount with young people from the Czech Republic, promoting their careers in education in England and so on. And so I think it did shape our lives to become socially aware and active. Yeah.
You've already kind of touched on it, but when did you first become aware of Nicholas Winton?
I was in the kitchen one morning and the phone went. And this voice said, "This is Esther Rantzen." And I knew who Esther Rantzen was. And my answer was, "And I'm the Queen of England." Literally, because I thought somebody was playing a joke. And then this lady said, "No, what was your name before you were married?" I said, "Milena Fleischmann." She said, "That's right." I said, "I've got a list in front of me with your name on it. We found this man called Nicholas Winton, who rescued 669 children. You and your sister were two of them. We want to surprise him by bringing him to the studio to That's Life. Would you come down to London and be one of the spectators, people taking part?" And I was so taken back. I said, "There are 5 other people in London I know that you could ask." She said, "Yes, but we've just chosen some names from the list. Are you prepared to come?" So I said, "Yeah, okay." So when I did finally get down to the studio, she said, "Now, we're asking this Mr. Winton to come. You're not to tell him who you are. You're going to be sitting with him and we're going to surprise him." So when he did turn up, and he was already in his 80s then, and sat down, and Esther Rantzen sort of says, "Mr. Winton, Vera Gissing is sitting on your left." And Vera, by then, had written a book called Pearls of Childhood, which was sitting in Esther Winton's husband's office. And he was planning to make a film out of Vera's book. And in that book, Vera is writing, "I'm still trying to find the man or whoever it was that helped us." Now, he was so taken back and obviously quite upset by the whole thing. We all gathered afterwards in what was known the green room, but he didn't stay very long. We didn't really get a chance to know him then. But Vera then discovers she'd only been living half an hour away in the next small town all those years. And she then became a sort of private secretary of his, because from that day, Esther Rantzen says on the screen, "Those of you who came, get in touch." The following week, she had them all in the studio with Winton back. And that's when she says, "Those of you who were rescued, will you stand up?" When you watch this film, they've put these 2 films together. And he stands up and she says, "The whole of the studio in touch." Eventually, when he talked about it, he said, "I realized from the 669 children, I had a family of 5,000.
Well, I wanted to ask you if this whole development, when his story came out, gave you to a new kind of community.
Yes, it did. And it also the film now has come full circle for me to bring that time back in importance, and also motivated both of us to make sure that we talk about it and discuss it and educate people as much as we can, because we're the last authentic witnesses to those events, and that's a very important part of it.
Obviously, it's very hard to emulate such a great man as Nicholas Winton, but is there anything you feel we should take from his story, or any lesson that we should learn?
Yes, I think, as he said, if you can do something good, try and do it. As Eva's just said, we talk to school children I mean, one of the things that we do is visit schools, and it's to leave them with the message that, as he used to say, it's not just not being bad by being good, but even if you help an old lady across the street, think of something that you can do to help the next person.
Yeah, I think the major lessons of his life are pure altruism, because there was nothing in it for him whatsoever, and to use, I think, his phrase, the power of one. As I talk to kids, I say, you don't need a committee. If you see something needs doing, you make the committee, you start. One person can make a difference in everybody's life.
A final question. You're here for the Czech premiere of One Life. What do you make of the movie, Eva?
I think it's a wonderful depiction of a great man and a very powerful message for everyone to see and emulate his life.
I think she said it all.
Many, many thanks indeed to Eva Paddock and Lady Milena Grenfell-Baines, who were such amazing and inspirational guests. This has been episode 96 of Prague Talk, a podcast from Radio Prague International. There are, of course, scores more out there for your listening pleasure. And if you're a first-time listener, why not check some of them out and subscribe to Prague Talk wherever you get your podcasts. But for now, from me, Ian Willoughby, thank you so much indeed for listening to Prague Talk. I'll talk to you again very soon.